So I felt like I was at a turning point where I was either going to turn around and leave this faith that I had grown up in and that I had committed as my own, or I was going to dig in and try to figure out this God who would allow this to happen to me and to us. And God gently drew me in to get to know and understand him through just the reading of his word and different Bible studies and different books.
Welcome to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. My name is Melissa Slemp, a certified nutritional health coach and the founder and CEO of Abundant Health with Melissa, where I help women with type 1 diabetes to feel more empowered and live their best life despite their diagnosis. Each week, I will bring conversations and strategies from guest experts and my experience living with type 1 for over 40 years now. So if you're a woman ready to redefine how diabetes can look and feel for you, then the Type 1 and Midlife podcast is the show for you. In this week's episode, we explore a few questions with our guest, Sandra Joseph. Having a chronic illness is a challenging and lifelong experience, and it requires learning to live with a condition that persists over time. However, despite the difficulties, it is possible to find contentment and joy in life. Now, in her 41 years of living with type 1 diabetes, author, speaker, and biblical life coach, Sandy is often called upon to talk with other women about how her life, her marriage, and her understanding of God has been different than expected. In her latest book, What He Asks, Sandy shares her journey and sorrow and hope, pain and joy, weeping and dancing through the exploration of the questions God has been asking his people from the beginning of time. Today, she invites us to consider how these questions can shape our experience of a life managing a chronic disease that may be different than what we expected. Come listen in. Just a reminder that nothing you hear on this Type 1 and Midlife podcast should be a substitute for professional medical advice. Please always consult your medical professional before changing your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Well, hello and welcome. Today we get to speak with Sandy Joseph. And Sandy, I am so excited you are here. We have had a chance to speak offline recently when we first met, and it's been a joy getting to know you and to share your faith. It's something that we have a lot in common, and it brings me joy to have you here. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, I am so excited. And as I shared in the intro, and you can go ahead and just sum this up yourself or just just elaborate as much or as little as you want to as far as type 1 diabetes for 41 plus years and something else we have in common. We're both the same year, just about diagnosed. And you help those who are living with chronic illness live with faith, perseverance, and hope. And your family, just share a little bit about your family and about what your day-to-day is.
Sure. Well, thank you, Melissa. Yes, we do share the fact that you and I have both had type 1 diabetes since 1981. At least that's the year I was diagnosed. I was married on September 5th, 1981, and was a new bride. And on our way to our honeymoon, the first night, I had my husband stop 2 times along the way to buy me something to drink. Couldn't quite figure out what was going home. And by the time I came home from our honeymoon, I had dropped 14 pounds that week. Very sick girl, didn't realize it until my mother got a look at me and knew something was wrong and did a deep dive back then into something called doctor books. Back then, they were just books that had symptoms and no internet back then. And she figured out what was wrong with me and called myself and my husband and convinced us to go to the emergency room. which I went into the emergency room with a blood sugar of over 830,
Mhm.
and was a very sick young bride, to put it that way.
Yes, what a road. My
Yeah.
goodness. For
So our
you,
marriage
for you and
started,
your husband. I mean, that is quite the
and
wow.
we were young. We were 21 and he had just turned 22. So it was it was a big, big surprise to both of us, to our families. We didn't have a history of type 1 diabetes. And so it was an overwhelming diagnosis at what was supposed to be a very exciting and happy time in our lives. And it cast a shadow over our beginning marriage that lasted for many years because of my struggle, not so much with accepting it, but accepting the God who allowed it to happen.
Mm, yeah. And that's a big um topic we're going to talk about today is just trying to accept. And I've shared too that there's articles I've written about this, and this is in recent years just for myself, because it's obviously taken me years, and it's all these different levels of acceptance, and I think it depends on the day and the time and the people you're around that kind of trigger certain feelings around it. So what was your relationship with diabetes diagnosis? Well, you kind of shared what that was, but was there any particular fears that you had?
So I was young, and obviously, like I said, there was just so much going on. Probably my biggest fear was my grandfather had died of pancreatic cancer when I was 16. So that would have been 5 years before. And so that, and obviously he had to take insulin at that point because of his pancreas not working correctly. So that was a fear of mine. And I remember finally getting to a good doctor that asked me what was wrong, and I expressed that fear, and he explained to me that those were two different diseases at that point, and that I could live a long life with diabetes. So originally, that was my biggest fear, was that I was going to die like my grandfather did.
Yeah.
But
It's amazing how that can stick with us too.
yeah,
And
but that passed quickly. I ended up, originally was just with a community doctor, and I ended up down in Pittsburgh at the endocrine department, and have just had excellent care over the years. That really made, I believe, all the difference.
nice. And something that we're definitely going to be focusing on and talking a little bit more about your book. Your book is called What He Asks. And I wanted to ask a question too, because, we're already starting to kind of unpack some of these layers that you shared in the book were just beautiful. I did have a chance to read the book. I just got it a week ago. I easily read through it yesterday. It's one of those, you have such beautiful stories that are so relatable, that speak to so many of us. And it was an easy read. It's definitely one that I want to go back and read, because you brought up so many really good points and references to scripture that are just that ties into for anybody at any point in their life. But I think specifically when it's a chronic disease. In the book, and I'm going to skip to section 2, and you talk about, and I believe the title of the section is "Where Are You?"
Mm-hmm.
And this is God asking us that question, which I think that struck me because, and then when I was reading on through that, you were talking about, well, God, where are you? That was the question, I think, that your heart was really talking. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of how I took it as well, or that's kind of how I felt it when I was reading it.
Correct. So in the early years, I just really struggled with this lifelong diagnosis at 21 that hit at such an early age. And so I was through college. I had graduated early from college, gone through college in 3 years, and, was marrying this high school or college sweetheart. And, we were at a Christian college. We were the couple that, looked like we were going to have this glorious, wonderful life. And I was really angry at God for allowing this diagnosis to come into my life at such a time that I thought was supposed to be a pinnacle of of happiness.
Mm.
And I struggled with that for years. And I struggled with a God who would allow it. And there were many times I would ask, where are you, God? Where are you? Who do you, why would you do this? This is not who I thought you would be. And you're not living up to my end of the bargain.
Mm-hmm.
I thought if we were good and we had done everything right, and we had, committed our lives to you, that you were going to make it easygoing. And it seemed like it was anything but easygoing, starting from 7 days in, and even on our honeymoon, because we didn't know it, but I was exceptionally sick on our honeymoon. So I felt like I was at a turning point where I was either going to turn around and leave this faith that I had grown up in and that I had committed as my own, or I was going to dig in and try to figure out this God who would allow this to happen to me and to us. And God gently drew me in to get to know and understand him through just the reading of his word and different Bible studies and different books. Johnny Erickson taught a great, just a great resource in my life, along with several Elizabeth Elliot books, just excellent mentors through reading to me. And I realized that as I started understanding the entirety of Scripture, that God often asks people questions. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't ask it because he needs the answer. He asks it because he wants people to understand. So the very first question in the Bible is one that God asked Adam and Eve after they had broken and committed sin and broken their, commitment to God. After he provided excellent accommodations for them, he says, where are you when they're hiding? And he doesn't ask it because he needs to know. He asks it because they need to know. Mm-hmm. And I started finding that God was asking me questions. Sandy, where are you? Where are you? Where are you physically? That was the first question. Mm-hmm. Where are you emotionally? And where are you spiritually? That was the first question that I truly felt like God was saying to me, okay, you quit asking the questions. Now listen to some that I am asking you. I can go on then to say the second question is, and this answers very easily as you work through where you are. Same question he asked Elijah after Elijah fought the gods of Baal, and he was laying beside a brook and he was exceptionally tired and cranky and said he didn't want to live anymore and said, look at all I've done for you, God, and this is the way you treat me and blah, blah, blah. And God says, what are you doing here? Like, how did you get here? Mm-hmm. How did you get here, Elijah? Like, how could we do this amazing miracle? And then all of a sudden you are whining and complaining to me about how you don't like your life and you are the only believer in the world. And those two questions were really good for me because when I started to work through them, I could pretty much understand where I was and how I got there. And these have been key components for me ever since then. And so continuing on, I'll let you ask another question, but those are the first two questions that he has asked me. And
it's perfect.
Start in my book, what he asked.
Yeah. And, we all think we know what's best and I think we can all relate to wanting to control a situation, the timing of what will happen, when it will happen. And it usually takes time to realize God's timing. I know we can all use examples of that. I know we can use examples with that, with everything that happens in life. It doesn't necessarily have to be a disease or an illness that you're struggling with every day. But just to see where he is going to show himself and reveal himself in us. And it's all about being there for everybody else. And I think that is something that I realized later in life, is that this was not he gave me something to share and to help others with. And that is really my gift with it.
Absolutely. And look what you're doing with it now.
Yeah. And to turn a pain into a purpose, and to utilize it. And now I'm just really expanding that with really bringing God into it and just, to shine the light on him. Because it's like you were saying before, it has nothing to do with us. We're his messengers. We are here to show his strength, and for others to see it in ourselves, and then for others to witness it and to see it in ourselves. I think it's kind of like it's a light that needs to be shown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult. There are difficult days. And
there is. If you read my book, you'll understand the difficulty. You don't live 41 years with a chronic illness and not have days that are just off. Recently, I had a day that was like that. And my husband came home. I was fixing dinner and just found me in tears. It was just one of those days where I just could not get a hold on the blood sugar issues, and they were doing their own thing, as often happens, and I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, and I was changing sites a couple different times. And anyhow, all that to say, and when my husband walked in and he saw me, he said, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I just said, "Oh, I've just had a crappy day." And then you make statements like, "I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just tired. I'm ready. I'm just so ready to be done with this." And my husband responded to me and he said, and yes, this is the same husband that I married 41 years ago. So just almost 42 now. He said to me, "Sandy, you're trying to do something that your body should do naturally, and you're not always going to get it right. And even when you do get it all right, your body's not necessarily going to respond. So let's have some grace with yourself." And, just those words of understanding. Okay, yeah, he's right. I am trying to do something that sometimes is really impossible to do.
Yes, it really is. Yes. We are asking a lot of ourselves every day, don't we? Yeah. Managing expectations. That's a phrase I tend to want to repeat. I have to repeat to myself. But, I like how he shared that with you, because that would be, if you could write that down and just put it on a sheet and tape it somewhere to see it. That's something we all just need to repeat to ourselves every day. Just a reminder that this is tough. It can almost seem humanly impossible some days, and that to do the best we can.
Yeah, if you're not going to get it perfect, and
no perfection at all. Yeah. Well, some of the things in that section, where are you, that God was asking, and you broke it up into smaller chapters or smaller sections of that. Smaller pieces of that section of the book: grief, fear, loneliness, envy, and crushing darkness. That's almost the stages, isn't it? And sometimes we circle around those different feelings throughout the years.
Which one stood out to you?
The one that stuck, loneliness, I think, because I know when I was first diagnosed, I felt very isolated. I literally did not know anybody else with type 1. So yeah, you felt definitely like you were on an island on your own. And the envy part really struck me. And I really love the story that you attached with that, just talking about how we can easily have, whether we're having lunch with a friend and the topic comes up, whether it's about what we're eating or drinking or what we're able to do or thinking that we can't do, and being envious. And envy obviously is something that God warns us about, right? The jealousy and to covet. And
so let me share the story from there.
Such a natural emotion, right? Yeah, go ahead.
So a longtime friend came up to me in church, and she's had a chronic illness for a long time. And she wanted to share a bit of good news with me that she was able to go off of meds and go off of some of the things that she had to do. And she said, I remember exactly how she said it. And she said to me, "I wanted to share the news with you because you will understand it. You'll know what it's like to have this chronic illness." And I could immediately, here we are in church, and I could immediately feel that envy. I don't know what it's like to get the word that I don't have to take this medication anymore, or I don't have to live with this anymore, that it's cured. And as much as I wanted to rejoice with her, I could just feel that enviness come in me. And I had a choice to make. And I ended up praying with her and, just giving Thanksgiving, but I turned away from her to walk into our worship service feeling like, okay, I need to work through this question. Where am I right now? Where am I right now, Lord? Because I could go into this whole thing angry and frustrated, or I can say to you, Lord, I am so envious of what she got back, of the good news that she got back. And I don't think I will hear that until I cross over into God's presence. And how can I be content and joyful, even with the recognition that right now there is no cure for diabetes. Yeah. There is a way to live with it, but there is no cure. Yeah. And so as I work through those questions, and maybe now's a good time to go on to the next question. I don't know, but it just that's where these questions help me, because it doesn't leave me get stuck. Mm-hmm. It allows me to think through, okay, why am I feeling this way? Where am I? How'd I get here? And what do I do with this now that I've identified? I'm jealous. I'm jealous. I'm envious of what you've given her and you haven't given me.
Yeah. And again, that's just that's our human heart nature. And that's how he created us, which is why we need him.
Correct.
So how do you, what does your day-to-day life look like, feel like, sound like when it comes to managing diabetes, and reaching out to God? So just to kind of inspire our readers a little bit too, or our listeners and the readers that are soon to get this book.
Yeah. Well, we were able to have 3 children back in the 80s and early 90s. We had one in 84, 87, and 92. And so we were very blessed. Those many years were very busy mothering years. And but over the years, I developed what they figured out was an insulin allergy to pork and beef insulin. So until the synthetic insulins came on, I really struggled with my body accepting the insulin. And there were numerous times where I was hospitalized, and back then they did something called sensitization, where they'd take you in, take you all off of the insulin, give you some time, and then start introducing it back in. When the pumps became available, I was one of the first people in Pittsburgh to be put on a pump. And that was at my request, because it acted like small allergy shots. And when the synthetic insulins came out, that really helped as well. So I have early stories of pump. I mean, way before nobody knew what they were. Nobody was wearing them.
Wow.
So it was, it was quite a story. But so, my family is grown now. We have obviously 3 grown daughters. Our oldest will be soon to be 39, and we have our daughters are in their 30s now, and we have 8 grandchildren with the possibility of another one soon to be adopted. So we're excited about that. So my days are much quieter than they were in those active years of mothering. And I had numerous careers that allowed me to travel the country and do all kinds of things. I was big in the scrapbooking movement and the conventions. I worked for Dayspring for a number of years, helping them get a direct sales company started. Okay. And so now life is a little quieter, unless the grandchildren come. And they were here this morning. So I wake up and I do water exercise several times a week, and that's really helpful with some of the other things that have come onset arthritis and all that kind of stuff. I am every morning, as much as possible, probably spend half an hour to an hour in the Word, reading, listening. My days are often very busy with people I get a lot of people saying, "Hey, Sandy, do you have time for lunch?" So I eat a lot of salads out for lunch. Spend a lot of time with women, because You don't need a chronic illness to be chronic. We are all in a chronic condition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you remember, I start the book out saying none of us are living the life we expected to live.
Mm-hmm.
All of us have had disappointments and struggles and things that we just question. God, where are you? And so I spend a lot of time one-on-one with women, and then fixing a healthy dinner for my husband and I. And we've got grandchildren events to go to, or we enjoy traveling, or, just my life is mostly evolves around people and being involved in people and listening a lot and asking good questions.
Yeah, I love that. And that just continues to fuel us and fill us, doesn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to give and to receive, right? Sometimes we have to do that as well. One of the things that I wanted you shared some statistics throughout your book, and there's one that I wanted to talk about, and the title of this chapter is "Am I Worth the Cost?" So I'm going to read this statistic that you shared. The American Diabetes Association reported in 2017 people with diagnosed diabetes incur average medical expenditures of $16,752 per year, of which about $9,600 is attributed to diabetes. On average, people with diagnosed diabetes have medical expenditures approximately 2.3 times higher than what expenditures would be in the absence of diabetes. We can all say, yep, that is true. Some more than others. It just depends on what type of care and devices and insulins that you're using. But it is quite the cost for sure. And
definitely. My husband has been self-employed for 30 some years. And so we have paid outright for my insurance, and it's a house payment. It's the cost of a house payment.
Yes.
And that doesn't, then you have a deductible, and then you have a 20% on top of that. And so we have lived this exceedingly, we know it well. And that's been his choice, but he has made sure I've always had good care, always had the best care available to me in this area. So it is a heavy cost. And there are days when I look at our retirement or our lack of retirement because of the job that he has had and the jobs that I have had. And I've always worked out of my home. Mostly that was because we had 3 daughters, but also because that was easier for me to manage things with the insulin allergy and all of that. So it has been an expensive, but yet, there's a story in the book about us needing to declare bankruptcy, and that is somewhat due to the diabetes, but that is also due to other situations. So that is, I don't want to throw that all under the bus on the diabetes care. But then we have to figure, what is a human life? What is the value of a human life? And so, to be able to be involved with my grandchildren, to have an impact on that next generation coming up, to be able to invest in others' lives, to be able to provide hope for other people, that is priceless. And God will fulfill his purposes for me, and then he'll call me home. And some days I can remind myself of that, and other days I need to be reminded of that. But when you get that first durable medical equipment bill at the end of in January, when your deductible's on there, you think, this is not worth it. This is not worth it, but it is. And so I'm like everybody else. You have to do some self-talking to yourself, and then you often have to ask your husband or your support person, is this worth it? Yes, this is worth it.
Yeah. And like all challenges, it works itself out, doesn't it?
It does. I do not know how we have made it this far Our daughters paid for all of their own college. I don't understand. They worked hard and got scholarships and all that, but we just didn't have it to support them. And
yeah,
so
I
you
totally
can have your
understand
mom
that.
or your college. Which do you want? And they all have
Right.
their master's degrees now, and we're all exceptionally
Nice.
proud of them. So
Another good example. If there's a will, God will provide, and He always
absolutely.
does. Yeah, there's always a different way to go, for sure. I understand that. A few other statistics. There's about 4 in a row. So the first one is 6 in 10 Americans live with a chronic illness. 4 in 10 have 2 or more chronic illnesses. Yeah, that's a statistic that I've seen before. It's just mind-boggling. It's just it points to a lot of different factors that are really kind of going on in the kind of world we're living in, and how
it also
illness
points to that we're living longer. There was just a recent article out in the Diatribe diabetes blog, and it talked about how diabetics are living longer. For you and I to live 41 years with diabetes that was unheard of back in the day we were diagnosed.
So true.
It just was unheard of. And now people are reaching that 50, that half a century mark, and even beyond, and living well.
Yeah.
So that is just an unheard of. We just have better health care and better.
We sure do.
Yeah.
Yes. And, the devices, the obviously insulins that we're not allergic to, which.
Yeah. And you probably remember the first time you put on that CGM, you went, oh my goodness, look at this. Like my husband, I swear we sat there and watched it for like an hour. Like, this is amazing.
I'm still amazed at the technology. And it's funny, like when we meet people, I know you come across this too, they see us wearing the device, if we wear it visibly. And I love it's a great conversation because it just blows people's minds away. They're like, what? That is so cool. That is just so neat. So I love sharing that. And, just to share the joy with people with what we're able to have help us, which
I'm sure you are like me. I remember leaving that hospital with a bottle of pork and beef insulin, syringes, and urine strips. And there was no A1C.
That's all we had. Yes.
I would go into the hospital once a month, get my blood drawn, and they would make the decision on what from that one blood draw.
It sure was. The sliding scale. Well, it wasn't even a sliding scale. I think it was very much, it was a kind of formula that they really gave for everybody. I don't think they knew any different because they didn't have the data to point better care plan to. They just did the best what they could with what they with what they were understanding, and that's another whole topic. I know just where we've come with the direction of, and I think in our best for myself too, I can definitely say this. My best care comes from myself. I think over the years, we have learned what works, what doesn't work, and we continue to learn. It's, I know hormonal changes and different times of life, things have shifted, but we really need to pay attention to how we're feeling, what our body's telling us. God's giving us signs. Those symptoms are good when things are not what they should feel like. And, that's where, it's a good time to be talking to the doctor more about those signs. So the next statistic, I'm having a hard time with that word today. Chronic illness is the leading cause of disability and death in America. That's scary too. Yeah. And I think, and that has a lot to do with, a lot of different diseases lead to other diseases. It's, and blood sugar, glucose, which is very inflammatory. It does tend to point to heart disease. It can point to cancer. It can, it's almost the first level of what can really get a snowball effect for your whole health system. So it's definitely real important for us all with whether it's 1, 2, or like it was saying here, 4 to, how many different chronic diseases somebody will have, like throughout their lifestyle or lifespan.
I recently went in because I had a trigger finger. I mean, a lot of people get trigger fingers, but the first thing the surgeon said to me is, oh, you have diabetics. I see diabetics in here all the time with trigger fingers. And then he looked at my feet and he said, you got really good feet for ankles and feet for 41 years. I was like, well, maybe the trigger finger is not from the diabetes this time. Maybe it's from the computer and typing a book. Who knows?
Right. They got to get to know us as people, not just diabetics. But we're not just people with diabetes. We have a whole lifestyle. We've got other things that can go on that could contribute to again, their symptoms. So it's not all blood sugar related. So a good reminder. Got to challenge the doctors on some of that sometimes. And yes, I did say chronic illness is the leading cause of disability and death in America. And then the 3 top chronic illnesses in America are heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, which is kind of what we were just pointing.
Type 2. That is not differentiated there. That is both of them.
Yes. Again, it's in a nutshell, it's blood sugar that's not within recommended control. So yeah, again, inflammatory. And this is my favorite. This gives hope to what we're talking about today, because that is what Sandy is bringing in her book, and that's what she's been sharing with us today. And this is individuals who have a chronic illness and have faith, have greater longevity, coping skills, and health-related quality of life, even during terminal illness, and less anxiety, depression, and suicide. That is powerful. And yeah, so what did you think when you first saw that? Because I know this is one that you share, and you are really, really something that we point to a lot, how important it is to have God.
So I'm going to finish with the last 2 questions that I write about in the book. So the third question is, do you want to be healed? Mm-hmm. And you'll remember Jesus asked that of the man at the pool of Siloam. Mm-hmm. And he's basically whining. He's laying on his mat and he's complaining. He can't make it when the pool stirs. He can't make it down to the water. And I think it's an interesting question, because anybody that is at the pool of Siloam and wants to be healed, of course, they're there because they want to be healed. So when Jesus comes across this man who's had this disease for 37 years, he says to him, or 36 or 37, mm-hmm. Do you want to be healed? Well, of course I do. But if you want to be healed, things have to change. And I'd say the biggest thing that has to change is your attitude and your thought about how life is. So no, I have not been healed of my diabetes, but my outlook, my thought about who God is, what he has me here for, my purposes on this earth, those things have changed. And I have been healed in so many ways that God has just been so dear to me to take those layers of pain and struggle and, God, you better answer me to, God, how can I serve you? How can I bring you glory? Yeah. And then the last question is, and this is the one that Peter asked Jesus, he says, Jesus asked Peter, he says, who do you say I am? Mm-hmm. And the only way you can answer that is if you get to know him. Mm-hmm. You've got to get to know who this God is. Who is he? What are some of his attributes? What makes him unlike you in a million different ways? And what makes him like you in ways? And so as you get to know who this God is and what his goal throughout all of the history of mankind, and it is to draw a people to himself. Mm-hmm. And to think that I'm going to be one of those people. Mm-hmm. And that my purposes now are to encourage and provide hope to other people, even in the midst of having a chronic illness that is not probably going to be healed this side of heaven. That's a great purpose. And I take great delight in that. And it brings me just so much hope that I no longer feel despondent. I want to share one last story for you.
Oh, please do.
I know that you've got a lot going on here, but, and I don't, but our this did not make the book cut. Maybe this will make the next book. But I was speaking at a small church in a little river town here in Western Pennsylvania. Couldn't figure out quite how they found me and what I was doing there. I just remember it. And it was a small little church. It was actually set in an old theater building. It was a small little town. There was just nothing about it that just screamed like, oh, you've really made it, Sandy. You're going to this big place to speak. But obviously God had put me there. And I'll never forget, I kind of went off track a little bit I told my diabetes story, which I didn't always do back in that day. And here there was a woman in the audience who had just gotten out of the psych ward, and she had tried to commit suicide because she had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Oh, wow. And I thought, okay, now I know why I'm here. I know why I'm here. And so obviously this woman and I ended up sitting together, and I ended up hearing her story, and I ended up hearing that her mother had had type 1 diabetes, and she had seen way too much to know that she never wanted to live with that. And it just seemed easier to end her life. And I was sitting there obviously having it for a much longer time than she had just been diagnosed. And I just thought, I don't know that I gave her the encouragement to go on. I do know that she was there because someone brought her. She was exceptionally wounded, and just on this journey of trying to accept it. But I do know she said, "You give me great hope." And I said to her, "Well, I'm not so sure I give you hope, but my God gives you great hope, and you can get to know my God just as I have, because he cares for you. He has so much compassion and kindness towards you." So that's where I think there is great hope. And then we get to share it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example of, that's a day that he put before you. That's all part of what we believe as well. Things do have a purpose. And there was a reason you met her that day. There was a reason that God put you with her that day, to deliver your gift to her. So, yeah.
And that's what I often think of, God has taught me a lot along the way, and I just want to share that out. And I want to, and the book, What He Asked, My Journey of Finding God Faithful Through Chronic Illness is a part of that. Meeting with people is part of that. I'm just really open to whatever God has in store, but I'm not looking to, I laugh and I say my book came out the same week that Prince Harry's book came out, and his book sales are slightly better than mine.
No comparison, though.
Yeah.
That's all.
But I think my story gives more hope than his
there
story.
You go. Yes. And that's how we can lie at peace and sleep well at night, and just know that we are taken care of, and that we always will be. So thanks so much. So tell us about your book. You just mentioned it, and I'm going to link all this in the show notes today. So this is going to make it be real easy for the listeners to find you and to purchase your book. Tell me about the journaling guide that comes along with this. I love this idea too.
Well, the journaling guide is a free download off of my website. And I do ask, I don't have it. You don't have to, but I am developing an email list so that you give me your email, but you can download that list for free. And it just works you through the questions that I've talked about. Where are you? What are you doing here? Do you want to be healed? And who do you say God is? Who do you say that I am? And those are questions that, honestly, when I get myself up and in, like, oh, something doesn't feel right. Why am I feeling this way? These are the questions I start to ask myself and work through. And they're all scripture based. And actually, if you look at scripture, God, and particularly Jesus, asks a lot of questions before he responds. He doesn't just go and, tell people what to do, but he asks them questions to engage them, to help them understand where they are. So the journaling guide is nothing more than helping you understand where you are, and then hopefully inviting you into that process of getting to know the Lord better.
Yes, yes. And it's a great way. A lot of our listeners may have just met you here and heard the hope that we've shared. And, just the fact that, we are both women that have lived 40 plus years with this disease, and we're thriving. We are doing well, living well, giving back. And I think there might still be that disconnect as to, well, I want that too. Hopefully they are feeling what we are sharing. And so I love the idea of this book is obviously going to get them there, so they can open this book, read it, read your story, get to know you even more, reach out to you, start with that journaling guide, or put that with the book. Obviously, that's going to kind of walk you through just to kind of keep you, because it's so easy to get disconnected, even though I think we all get up in good intentions every day. We do. We all have a giving, loving heart. But it is easy for the world to get in the way, and our doubts and our fears to get in the way. But I like this idea of a book, journals, and in episode 1, we had Casey Parker here talking about her journal. That's another great one to refer to. So if you didn't check, if you didn't listen to episode 1 yet, I encourage you to go back and listen to that as well.
I just got Casey's book, and it's a really sweet little read, and
isn't it?
It's just another good place to start. I highly recommend it.
Sure is, yeah. And you can also find Sandy on Instagram. So again, it's What He Asks Books, I believe, is your handle, right? So it has books at the end.
Yeah, book. What He Asked Book.
Okay, I apologize. Yeah.
That's all right. And I am not a big always on social media, just like hitting it all the time. I really want to invest well in people, whoever the Lord puts on my path that day. But you always, people reach out to me on email, they reach out to me via social media, always respond, have had some great Zoom conversations and phone calls with people. And I'm just really open to what the Lord has for me in this stage of life. The book was a surprise call by God during COVID. And He called me to write it during COVID, and it was a great journey for me.
Yes, definitely.
It was a lot of grief, uncovering grief that had never been dealt with, but also uncovering God's faithfulness along the way.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sandy. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. And thank you for spending some time with us today to share your story and your hope-filled strategies, which is really, what we're trying to do here is to bring women together and to know that we're not going through this alone, that we have each other, and we definitely have.
Melissa, you're doing a great
love
job.
And support.
And I'm excited for what's ahead for you and how you're bringing this community of women together. Many blessings. Thank you so much. Many blessings.
Back at you. Thank you so much again. Well, until next week, thanks again, and fill your day with some hope and joy and love and gratitude. Until next time. Thank you for listening to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. And be sure to check us out at abundanthealthwithmelissa.com for our free resources. See you next week.